Everyone has a demon. Most people just don't know it. I do. I can see them. They perch on shoulders or ride a piggyback, whispering in ears. Sometimes they speak words soothing and sickly sweet. Other times bitter and venomous. There are many types of demons. Some are tiny and innocuous, even cute. Others are grotesque, stupid, foul, and slovenly. A few are abominations, twisted, malevolent perversions, who revel in misery and suffering. Those are the worst kind, the only ones that really scare me. You can tell a lot about a person by looking at their demon, but I couldn't always see them. No, at first, I could only see my own. My demon's name was Jack. Well, that's what I called him anyways. They never tell you their real names. That was okay by me. Jack fit him just fine. I've known Jack my whole life. As far back as I can remember, he'd always been around, and he'd always been my best friend. Whenever life got tough, Jack was there for me. When I was lonely, Jack would play with me. When I was sad, he'd crack jokes to make me laugh. When I was bored, he would tell me stories. Jack always knew the right things to say. When I was little, I thought my parents could see him too. They called Jack my imaginary friend. I didn't know what that big grown-up word imaginary meant. But I surely felt proud when my mom would tell the other grown-ups how creative her son Kevin was. And what a vivid imagination he had. And it was all thanks to Jack. Sometimes they asked me questions about Jack, like, "Is Jack going to daycare with you today?" Other times they asked him questions about me like, "Hey Jack, is Kevin going to finish all of his green beans tonight like a good boy?" He would always answer, but as time went on, I began to notice something strange. The reactions to his replies never seemed quite right. It was like they weren't actually listening to him at all. Then, they'd get all smug, put on those solemn adult faces, and say things like, "I think Jack wants you to finish your green beans. Don't you think so, honey?" It seems to me that they were ignoring Jack on purpose, and I'd get frustrated and start to cry. I was 9 when I finally figured it out. My parents couldn't see him. They thought it was a big joke, and that I was making up stories. They only played along to humor me, but I knew the truth. They were the ones pretending, not me. Jack was as real as anyone else could be. I quickly came to the conclusion that if my parents wouldn't believe me, maybe other people would. I began to talk about him all the time, to my bus driver, my teachers, and the kids at school, and anyone else who would listen. I tried to convince them that Jack was real. That's when it stopped being cute. My parents started to worry about me. At night, I'd lay in bed, listening to them talk in the kitchen. My mother would start to weep, and my father would speak quiet, soothing words to her. "It's just a phase. He'll grow out of it. All kids go through this. It just lasts longer for some." Jack would sit by my side, comforting me. "Why can't they see you?" I asked. "You have a gift, a very special gift, and they don't," Jack would say, smiling. "Well then, why don't they believe what I say? I'm their son. Do they think I'm a liar?" That's just the way people are. You're very young and have much to learn about this world. It can be a very nasty place, but I'll always be here for you, Kevin. You can count on me. I'll always be here for you. Around this time, I started getting into trouble at school. The other kids would make fun of me when I talked about Jack. They called me Crazy Kevin and Baby Boy Kevy. And they would laugh and punch at the air and tell me that they were beating up Jack. They would taunt me and push me down, and when I tried to defend myself, I would get in trouble. Kids can be so cruel to one another, and the teachers weren't much better. They tell me, "Well, Stop talking about your imaginary friends so much and the other kids will leave you alone. So I did. I wasn't a dumb kid. I knew they made fun of me because I was different. I had an imaginary friend, and they didn't. And even though I knew Jack was real, everyone else thought I was crazy. Imaginary friends weren't supposed to be real. The unknown scared them. I scared them. I grew to hate being teased and ostracized all the time, and started to wonder if maybe I was a little crazy. So I stopped talking about Jack, and I stopped talking to Jack. I ignored him and tried to pretend he wasn't real. Jack got angry. Sometimes at night, he would knock things over or throw things around my room to try to get my attention. Other times, he'd break things in my house, vases, pictures, windows, and I'd get blamed for it. Even worse, he started appearing in my dreams, tying me up, torturing me in strange rituals, chanting, and carving esoteric symbols into my flesh. I would wake up in a cold sweat, mind reeling, and Jack would be there hovering above my bed, always smiling. It didn't matter how hard I tried to ignore him or pretend he wasn't real. Jack never went away. Eventually, when I couldn't stand the torment anymore, I began speaking to him again in whispers, late at night while the rest of the house slept. I explained the situation to him, about my parents, my teachers, and the kids at school. When I told him, he smiled warmly and said he understood. Jack always understood. Then he let me in on a little secret. He wasn't an imaginary friend at all. He was a demon, and everyone had a demon. Just like me, most people just couldn't see them. They didn't know their demons existed. Jack reminded me that I was special, that I had a gift. I still had my doubts, but Jack wasn't upset. He told me that I was so special that he was going to get me another gift, just to prove it. Then he disappeared. For the first time in my life, I was completely by myself. I felt scared, abandoned, and so utterly alone. Without Jack, I was miserable. A week passed, and still no Jack. Was this how normal people live their lives? So lonely all the time? How did they stand it? Then one night, I woke up to find him there standing over my bed, like he never left. I was ecstatic. "Where did you go?" I asked him. "To get your gift, of course." "So then what is it?" "You already have it," Jack answered. "But where? You didn't give me anything." "Shh, quiet child, go to sleep now. It would all make sense in the morning." Then he sang me a lullaby in an ancient language I could not understand, and I drifted off to the land of dreams. I woke up the next morning as excited as Christmas Day. I was ready to run out of my bedroom and see my new gift, but Jack grabbed me by one arm and spoke to me sternly. "You must make me a promise, Kevin. Whatever you see out there, you must promise never to tell anyone about it. You must never speak of it aloud. Otherwise your gift will disappear. Otherwise, I will disappear." I promised. "Promise me 3 times, Jack said, and so I did too. Then he smiled his familiar smile. "You promised me 3 times to never speak of what you see. Do not forget your promise, Kevin." We walked into the kitchen, and I stopped dead in my tracks. There at the breakfast table sat my mother and father. On each of their shoulders perched a demon. On my mother sat a large puffy creature, a mix between a bunny rabbit and giant marshmallow, but with a huge doughy eyes and long silver fangs. On my father sat a long skinny worm-like creature with hollow eyes, and the face of a bat. It was blue and translucent, like ice in a cloud of steam rose from its body. Its tail was coiled around my father's neck. I yelped in surprise, and 8 eyes turned towards me, 4 human and 4 demonic. I made some lame excuse to explain my outburst, which satisfied my parents, but the demons continued to stare at me wide-eyed. At first, they were angry, but then I realized that they were actually frightened. They were afraid of me, afraid of the fact that I could see them. The bad snake demon hissed something I couldn't understand, and Jack barked back in a gruff, brutal language that echoed loudly in our tiny kitchen. My oblivious parents returned to their breakfast while their demons cowered submissively at Jack's feet. And Jack cried, wickedly, and from that day forward, I saw them everywhere I went. It was scary to be sure, but at least I knew I wasn't the only one. It wasn't just me. Everyone has a demon. Still, it could be overwhelming. There were so many of them, and they all knew that I knew. They would speak to me sometimes, telling me all sorts of horrible things. They bragged about the twisted and perverted acts that they had convinced their people to commit. They told me their people's evil thoughts and darkest secrets. The demons always delighted in recounting these tales in graphic detail. Sometimes Jack would make them stop when I asked him to. Other times he wouldn't, or even worse, he couldn't. Some people's demons were scarier than Jack, stronger than Jack, and there was nothing he could do about it. Every once in a while, I would catch an evil glint in Jack's eyes while this demon recounted tales of the wicked and foul deeds their people had committed. He took pleasure in these moments. Sometimes he almost seemed jealous. It eventually became too much for me, and I had to make some changes. I began walking to school instead of riding the bus. I avoided crowds and started spending my free time alone in my room or out hiking in the woods. But it was no use. I couldn't avoid people forever, especially since I had to go to school. My grades began to slip. It was impossible to concentrate in class with all those demons glaring at me, whispering to me, laughing at me. I told Jack about this, but he shrugged it off and reminded me that this was a gift, that I was special. He promised me that one day I would be glad that I had it, and I believed him. Jack was always there for me. Jack always took care of me. Sometimes I felt very afraid. I could always tell who the really bad people were by the size and nastiness of their demon. The adulterers, the rapists, the murderers, the child molesters. I could see them all. They walked in the streets in secret, mingling with normal people like wolves among sheep, and nobody knew a thing except for me. You'd be surprised just how many of them are out there, and there was absolutely nothing I could do about it. Not then. That all changed in the 10th grade when I met Elijah. Elijah was a bully, and he made no attempt at trying to hide it. He was a fat, ugly, hulking slab of a boy, and he was stupid too, or willfully ignorant at the very least. But when it came to bullying, Elijah was a genius. He had this uncanny ability to find a person's favorite thing in life, their greatest source of joy, and turn it against them. He seemed to make it his personal mission to seek out the smaller, smarter, weaker, and the more introverted kids, which I was one of, and tormented them endlessly. He also happened to have one of the nastiest demons I had ever seen. It was a massive hippopotamus-looking beast with twisted horns, and its breath smelled like rotten corpses. The demon lay lodging across Elijah's shoulders, making him slouch when he walked. The popular kids ignored most of us losers, but they despised Elijah. In his mind, that must have been our fault, and he made sure we paid for it. He delighted in tripping kids in the hallway, knocking books out of hands, snapping girls' bras, shooting spitballs in class, and generally making our lives a living hell. Elijah's specialty was stealing lunches. which he did with a great aplomb. I never once saw him buy a lunch or bring his own. He'd always simply go from table to table, taking what he wanted from us fucking nerds. He always made sure to take my milk. I don't even think he liked it, but he knew that I liked it. So he taked it, chugged it down, and threw the empty carton in my face, laughing all the while. Jack began whispering things to me about Elijah, what a horrible person he was, and all the nasty things he did when he was alone. He told me how Elijah reveled in torturing and killing people's pets out in the woods. He told me about the terrible things Elijah did to his little sister late at night. He told me about the horrible things Elijah would do in the future. He told me that if Elijah died, no one would miss him, that the world would be a better place without him. I tried to ignore the things Jack said, but the longer it went on, the more sense he seemed to make. The final straw came one day when Elijah caught me alone in the bathroom. I was standing at the urinal relieving myself when I heard the door open and heavy footsteps come up behind me. Aw, look at this. Widow Quasi Quavy's having a widow pee-pee break. He snarled in my ear, his breath hot on my neck like a foul breeze wafting through a garbage dump on a sweltering summer day. I ignored him and tried to finish the task at hand as quickly as possible. What's wrong, faggot? You deaf or something? I said nothing, thinking he'd get bored and leave me alone. It was a vast miscalculation. He kicked me hard in the backpack, smashing my chest into the urinal and my face into the concrete wall. I saw stars and fell to the ground, my member still in hand, still urinating. Oh, no, look at that. Widow Keffy fell and now he is wetting himself. Here, let me give you a hand with that. I lay on the ground in a daze and heard a fly unzip somewhere above me. Then warm, putrid stream poured over my stomach and down my legs, and Elijah was laughing. I covered my head, closed my eyes, and pretended I was somewhere else. When it was finally over, I heard the door slam shut, and from the hallway, Elijah yelled, "Hey everybody, check it out! Crazy Kevin pissed himself!" When I opened my eyes, there was Jack, my demon. He stared at me with a knowing smirk on his face. "Okay," I said. "You win. Tell me what I have to do." Jack's smile widened. "Easy," he said. "Switch to almond milk." For the next 2 weeks, I packed my lunch with almond milk instead of my regular 2%. I thought it tasted disgusting, but I hardly got to drink it anyways. Elijah stole it from me almost every single day. He really seemed to enjoy it too. One day after school, there was a knock at my door. It was a stranger, disheveled and wild-eyed, dressed in a cheap suit. His demon was a snake, red as venomous blood. Venom dripped from its maw. He never said a word. He simply handed me a crumpled brown paper bag and then walked away. I opened the bag and pulled out a clear vial with a strip of masking tape on the side. On the masking tape, in clear black Sharpie marker, a single word was written: cyanide. Jack was grinning again. "For your milk," he whispered. "Tastes like almonds." The next morning, I mixed the cyanide into my almond milk and then placed my thermos into my lunch bag like usual. I ditched the empty vial in a dumpster on my way to school. When lunchtime rolled around, Elijah stole my milk as usual. A few minutes later, he was convulsing on the floor. I sat and watched, casually munching on a sandwich. A few minutes after that, he was dead. I wasn't sad. I actually felt good, better than I had in a long time. The cause of death was later determined to be a cerebral hypoxia, likely brought on by a stroke. Very few more is passing. I started skipping school more and more often after that day Elijah died. A few more months later, I dropped out completely. Not that I felt guilty, or thought that I might get caught. No way. I just had other more important work to do. I took a job in a rough part of the city, working at a crumb-by old book-binding factory. The work was monotonous but easy, and I soon saved up enough money to buy a used car and rent a shitty studio apartment. I worked second shift at a factory from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. Most guys hated the hours, but I found them perfect for supporting my extracurricular activities, finding bad people and killing them. My demon helped me. Jack was a real natural when it came to this. He helped me track down people with particularly nasty demons, and he would tell me all the vile things they had done. We stalked them like hunters, learning their patterns and routines. Then, Jack would tell me the best way to kill him and how to get away with it. And I always got away with it. Pimps, rapists, drug dealers, pedophiles, human traffickers. I did them all. Sometimes I made it look like an accident, or a suicide, or a robbery gone wrong. I beat, stabbed, strangled, shot, and drowned. I even pushed one fat fucker onto the third rail of a subway. He fried just like bacon, and even smelled like it. And Jack was always there for me, protecting me, making sure I didn't get caught. The best part was, I never felt bad about what I was doing. Every single person I killed was a wretched excuse for a human being. They deserved it. I was making the world a better place. Some might even say I was a hero. My conscience was clear. I slept like a baby. Killing people became normal, fun even. It was my hobby, and damn, I was good at it. Eventually, I didn't think about it anymore. I just did it. And that's when it all came unraveled. I was out on patrol one night, following the SUV of a mid-level drug dealer as he made his pickups. I thought I was being careful, but he must have noticed me, because as we came to an intersection, he slowed down, waited until the light was just changing from yellow to red, and then floored the gas pedal. I tried to follow, but was a second too late. A black BMW going the other way slammed into the side of my car, sent it spinning through the intersection. My head must have hit the steering wheel pretty hard, because I briefly lost consciousness. When I came to, my ears were ringing, stars danced before my eyes, and smoke drifted from the hood of my car. Then I heard another noise, angry, loud cursing. The owner of the BMW was striding towards me. He was a mountain of a man. His face was bright red, fists clenched, arms swinging, and spittle flying from its mouth as he screamed. I lurched from my seat to face him, blood pouring from the gash in my forehead. Upon the man's shoulder was one of the most horrific demons I had ever seen. It was a huge brown, pale white, and bloated like a corpse. Pus oozed from the 1,000 weeping sores which covered its corpulent body. It had no arms or legs. Instead, its entire mass was one giant face consisting of 2 beady black eyes, and one enormous gaping mouth, filled with row upon row of razor-sharp teeth. A forked tongue slithered snake-like between its fangs, flitting through the air, searching for a victim. I felt the vial rise from my throat and fought it back down. As the man surged towards me, I felt my rage rise. I found myself thinking about Elijah, about all the times he had teased me, tormented me, humiliated me. I noticed I had heard a whisper in my ear, his soft voice, perhaps Jack's, perhaps my own. I really couldn't tell anymore. Do it. My mind went black. My vision went white around the edges. I felt like I was trapped behind my eyes, watching. but unable to control what was happening. The man was close, screaming in my face. He meant to hurt me. I reached into my pocket, and the rest was a blur. A flash of chrome in the streetlight, a hot turn spraying me in the face. The man's eyes bulging with rage one moment, then rolling back into his skull the next. His body slumped to the ground, my knife buried in his throat. I looked to Jack for help, but Jack was laughing like a madman, and screeching something in that foul ancient language. Realization set in. I've killed this man, done him right out in the open, at a city intersection, under a street light, with no planning or forethought, with no escape route, no plan for cleanup. I turned to Jack in a panic. Are you just going to stand there laughing? Help me, tell me what to do. How do I fix this? He was howling now. This one was all you. I had nothing to do with it. The man you just murdered was a politician, a city council man, perhaps no less of a criminal than the pimps and gangbangers we normally kill. But this guy did it under the guise of law and order. I didn't tell you to do this. No, you chose this. I felt the blood drain from my face, and the world began to spin around me. I was stumbling towards the car, trying not to vomit, when I heard a noise behind me, followed by the scream of a siren. A cascade of red and blue light reflected off the windows of my car and the surrounding shops. A police cruiser peeled out from the gas station across the intersection and rushed towards me. I sat in the interrogation room for hours. Jack stood next to me, smirking as the detectives worked me over. It all came out. They found everything. Enough evidence in my car and my apartment to tie me through dozens of murders. They said it would be a miracle if I got life in prison. The DA would go for the death penalty on this one for sure. Then they were laughing, and the demons were laughing, and Jack was laughing too. My court attorney was a mousy man with thick glasses and mustard stains on his suit jacket. His demon was a small, skittering cockroach with the sallow face of a dead baby. The lawyer did not seem optimistic about my chances. The only hope to avoid death penalty, he said, was to make a claim of guilty but insane or mentally ill. Have you ever felt like you weren't in control of your actions? He asked. Have you ever heard voices in your head telling you to do things? Has God, the devil, or a demon ever spoken to you or forced you to do something that you didn't want to do? I pondered that for a moment. Jack was smiling, but his stare was black. Don't forget your promise, he whispered. You swore to me. You swore 3 times, never to tell anyone. I remember, I replied, but this thing you've given me is not a gift. It's a curse. All of this was your fault. You've ruined my life. I'll be glad to finally get rid of you. Jack just smiled, that terrible malicious smile. Do as you wish then. My lawyer looked confused. Who are you talking to? My demon, I said. Everybody has a demon. Most people just couldn't see them. My demon is named Jack, and yes, he tells me to do things. Now I'm alone. Jack is gone forever. I sit here in a straitjacket surrounded by 4 padded walls, waiting for the nurse with the goat-headed demon to bring me my pills, waiting to forget. I'll never see the sunshine again. And now everyone has a demon. Everyone, except me.